The metallic walls of Earth's Central Command echoed with heated arguments as another colony fell to the enemy. The room was filled with military leaders from across Earth's territories, their faces showing a mix of anger, fear, and loss of hope. The morning light streaming through the tall windows did nothing to lift their dark mood. Admiral Han sat at the head of the oval table, his weathered face lit up by the blue glow of holographic displays. His fingers drummed against the polished surface as he watched the Kraxan Empire's ships move across the star map like a swarm of deadly insects. Red markers showed human colonies falling one after another to their relentless advance. 43 minutes ago, we lost all contact with New Singapore, Commander Park announced, her voice tight with frustration. She stood up, pointing to a cluster of stars that had just turned red on the display. 5 million civilians. Gone. Just like that. She slammed her hand on the table, making others jump. The Kraxan's quantum shields are impenetrable. Our best weapons barely scratch their vessels. General Wu shook his head slowly. We've tried everything in our arsenal. Plasma torpedoes, antimatter bombs, even the new quantum disruptors. Nothing works against their defenses. Perhaps if we attempted to negotiate. Admiral Chen started, but angry voices cut him off. Negotiate. Colonel Santos spat the word out. The Kraxan don't negotiate. They don't even bother to respond to our attempts at communication. They just keep coming, taking our worlds, and he couldn't finish the sentence. The room erupted into another round of arguments. Some officers wanted to evacuate the remaining colonies and fall back to Earth. Others insisted on fighting to the last ship. A few suggested desperate plans involving suicide runs against the Kraxan fleet. Admiral Han watched them all, his dark eyes taking in every detail. He'd seen this before, the slow descent into panic as hope slipped away. In 40 years of military service, he'd never faced an enemy like the Kraxan. They were methodical, precise, and utterly unstoppable. The holographic display updated again, showing another colony under attack. The room fell quiet as they watched the red dots of Kraxan ships surround the blue marker of New Jakarta. 3 million more lives hanging in the balance. That's when Lieutenant Yoon stepped forward. He was young for his rank, barely 30, with a reputation that preceded him. Some called him brilliant. Others said he was dangerous. His unorthodox tactical analysis had saved 2 colonies in the past year, but his methods often went against traditional military doctrine. Yoon clutched a data pad in his hands, his knuckles white with tension. He cleared his throat, and all eyes turned to him. Even Admiral Han stopped drumming his fingers. "Sir," Yoon addressed the Admiral directly, "I have a solution." His voice was quiet but firm. "But you're all going to think I've lost my mind." The room stayed silent, waiting. Admiral Han leaned forward slightly. "Go on, Lieutenant." Yoon connected his data pad to the main display. New images appeared above the table, complex diagrams, mathematical formulas, and what looked like gaming console schematics. Several officers frowned in confusion. "We've been fighting the Kraxan wrong," Yoon said, moving through his presentation. "We keep trying to match their strength, their precision, their perfect order. That's exactly what they expect. It's what they understand." He paused, looking around the room. "But what if we did something they could never predict? Something so completely against military logic that their systems wouldn't know how to respond?" Commander Park raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you suggesting, Lieutenant?" Yoon took a deep breath. "I want to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. I want to introduce chaos into their perfect order." He brought up more diagrams. "And I want to do it using video games." The room erupted again, this time with laughter and dismissive comments. But Admiral Han didn't laugh. He watched Yoon carefully, seeing something in the young officer's eyes that the others missed: absolute certainty. Silence. Han's command cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell quiet once more. "Lieutenant Yoon has earned the right to be heard. His previous strategies, while unusual, have saved lives." He nodded to Yoon. Explain your plan. All of it. As Yoon began to outline his incredible idea, the sun continued to rise over Earth's central command. Outside, the city was waking up, unaware that in this room, humanity's last hope might rest on a plan so crazy it just might work, or get them all killed. Either way, they were about to make history. This was the moment when everything changed. The day humanity stopped trying to fight like perfect soldiers and remembered what made them unique, their ability to think outside every box, break every rule, and turn seemingly crazy ideas into victory. The question was, would they be brave enough to try? Lieutenant Yoon stood before the most powerful military leaders on Earth, his hand steady as he projected a complex diagram onto the main display. The holographic image filled the command center with a soft blue glow, showing intricate patterns that looked like a mix between a spider's web and a computer circuit. The Kraxen's entire civilization is built on perfect order, Yoon explained, pointing to different parts of the diagram. Their defense systems, their society, everything operates on absolute mathematical precision. That's their weakness. Dr. Kim, head of Earth's Quantum Research Division, leaned forward in her chair. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the patterns. You're suggesting we use chaos mathematics to disrupt their systems. That's insane. Yoon smiled. Exactly. They can't defend against what they can't comprehend. Human unpredictability isn't just our nature. It's going to be our weapon. He tapped his data pad, and the display changed to show recordings of Kraxen ships in battle. Their movements were perfect, like a dance where every step was calculated down to the smallest detail. Look at how they fight, he said. Every maneuver is optimal. Every response follows exact protocols. They don't improvise. They don't adapt. They simply execute perfect solutions to known problems. Admiral Han watched thoughtfully as Yoon brought up another image, this one showing human gaming patterns from popular space combat simulators. The movements were erratic, unpredictable, sometimes even seemingly random. Now watch this, Yoon said. He overlaid the two patterns. When human players encounter Kraxen-style perfect tactics in games, they don't try to match them. They do things that make no logical sense. They make mistakes on purpose to set up unexpected attacks. They sacrifice valuable units for no apparent gain, only to reveal the true strategy 10 moves later. Dr. Kim stood up and walked closer to the display. And you're saying we can use this somehow? Turn human gaming behavior into a weapon. Yoon nodded eagerly. We modify gaming consoles to generate chaos patterns based on actual human player data. Then we feed these patterns into the Kraxen's defense network. Their systems will try to analyze and predict our actions, but they'll be attempting to find logic in pure chaos. Commander Park shook her head. But surely their computers can handle random data. That's just it, Yoon replied. This isn't random. Random they could handle. This is human chaos. Patterns that almost make sense, but then break their own rules. It's like trying to teach perfect grammar to someone who speaks entirely in memes. The room was quiet as the implications sank in. Dr. Kim was the first to understand. Their entire system is built on finding and following patterns, she said slowly. If we feed them data that their algorithms can't categorize, their systems will keep trying to find the pattern, Yoon finished. They'll devote more and more processing power to analyzing data that has no logical solution. It's like asking a perfect mathematical mind to divide by zero, over and over again. Admiral Han stood up. And what happens then, Lieutenant? In theory, Yoon brought up one final diagram. Cascade failure. Their networks will be so busy trying to understand and counter impossible strategies that they won't be able to execute their actual defense protocols. We can bring down their entire military infrastructure without firing a single shot. The room erupted in discussion. Some officers were clearly skeptical. Others looked intrigued. Dr. Kim was already scribbling notes, her mind racing with possibilities. There's more, Yoon said, raising his voice slightly. The room quieted again. The Kraxan don't just use their defense network for military operations. Their whole society runs on the same principles of perfect order. If we can introduce enough chaos into their systems, we could disrupt their entire civilization. Dr. Kim finished, looking both amazed and slightly frightened by the idea. Admiral Han walked slowly around the table, studying the displays from different angles. Finally, he turned to Yoon. How long would it take to implement this plan? We already have the gaming data. With Dr. Kim's help, we could modify the consoles within a week. The hard part will be getting close enough to a Kraxan relay station to introduce the chaos patterns into their network. The Admiral nodded slowly. And what are the chances this will work? Yoon smiled again. Sir, if I could calculate the exact chances of success, this plan wouldn't work at all. That's the beauty of it. We're not just using chaos. We're becoming chaos. The room fell silent once more as everyone considered the implications. They were looking at a plan that went against every military principle, every logical strategy. It was completely insane, and perhaps that's exactly why it might work. Admiral Han returned to his seat and looked around the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we've tried fighting the Kraxan with conventional weapons and tactics. We've tried matching their precision and their technology. None of it has worked. He turned to Yoon. Perhaps it's time we tried something truly human. The sun was now high in the sky outside, its light mixing with the blue glow of the holograms. In that light, humanity's leaders began to plan their most insane military operation ever, using video games to save the world. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, hidden away from prying eyes, a secret facility hummed with activity. The underground base had been built during the early days of the war, but never before had it hosted such an unusual operation. In a large room filled with computers and gaming equipment, a small team worked around the clock, their determination visible in their tired faces. Captain Lee stood at her workstation, surrounded by modified gaming consoles and tangles of cables. Her uniform jacket was draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up as she soldered delicate components. Around her, technicians moved with purpose, converting ordinary gaming devices into weapons that might save humanity. Check this pattern sequence, she called out to one of the technicians. The young woman brought up a display showing chaotic data streams generated from thousands of recorded gaming sessions. See how unpredictable the movements are. This is what we need more of. Dr. Song, their lead programmer, walked over to examine the readings. His face showed the doubt that had been growing over the past few days. Captain, he said quietly, I've been running simulations all night. We're betting everything on the assumption that they can't adapt to randomness. What if we're wrong? Captain Lee put down her tools and turned to face him. They've spent millennia perfecting order, she replied, her voice firm but kind. They can't change their fundamental nature overnight. Think about it. Have you ever seen a Kraxan ship make an illogical move? No, Song admitted, but that doesn't mean they can't. Actually, it does. Lee picked up one of the modified consoles. Look at how these devices work. We're not just feeding them random data, we're giving them human intuition, gut feelings, split-second decisions that defy logic. The Kraxan would need to completely rebuild their entire civilization to understand this kind of thinking. Around them, the work continued. Technicians were installing special chips that would convert gaming behavior into warfare tactics. Others were programming the devices to generate an endless stream of unpredictable battle strategies based on millions of recorded human gaming sessions. Watch this, Lee said, activating one of the completed units. On a nearby screen, a simulation showed a space battle. The human ships moved in ways that made no tactical sense, until suddenly, their seemingly random movements resulted in a perfect attack position. That's from a teenager playing Space Commander II last month, Lee explained. No military training, no tactical education, just pure human instinct. The Kraxan computers will try to find the logic behind these moves, but there isn't any. It's just a kid playing a game. Dr. Song watched the simulation replay. And we're going to feed their systems thousands of these patterns simultaneously. Millions, Lee corrected him. Every impossible move, every crazy strategy, every moment where a human player did something completely unexpected. Their processors will be trying to analyze and counter moves that have no logical explanation. A young technician approached with a status report. "Captain, we've completed modifications on the first batch. Ready for testing." Lee nodded and called the team together. In the center of the room, they set up a simplified version of a Kraxan defense system. It was time to see if their crazy plan had any chance of working. The first test began. They fed the system a small sample of their chaos patterns. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the defense computer began to show signs of stress, its processors struggling to analyze the data. "Look at that," Lee pointed to the readings. "It's trying to categorize the patterns, predict the next moves. But there's nothing to predict. Each action defies the previous one." The team watched as the test system's performance degraded. Its responses became slower as it devoted more resources to analyzing the impossible data. Finally, with a soft peep, it shut down completely. "It worked," Dr. Song whispered, his doubt beginning to fade. "It actually worked." Captain Lee smiled. "That was just one system with a tiny fraction of our data. Imagine what will happen when we introduce this chaos into their entire network." As the team celebrated this small victory, Lee's communicator beeped. Admiral Han's voice came through clearly. "Captain, what's your status?" "First tests are successful, sir. We should be ready for deployment in 48 hours. "Make it 24, the Admiral replied. "We just lost contact with another colony." The celebration died down immediately. Everyone in the room knew what was at stake. They returned to their work with renewed purpose, modifying more consoles, refining their chaos patterns, preparing for humanity's strangest counterattack. Dr. Song looked at the failed test system, then at his captain. "You know, if someone had told me a week ago that we'd be trying to save Earth with video games. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that make the least sense," Lee replied, picking up her tools again. "Now let's make sure these devices work perfectly at being imperfect." The underground facility continued its vital work, turning humanity's gift for chaos into a weapon against an enemy that only understood order. Above them, the Pacific Ocean kept their secret, while across space, the Kraxan Empire continued its advance, unaware that their perfect world was about to meet its match in human unpredictability. The stealth ship Shadow Dancer moved through space like a leaf on a dark river. Its special coating absorbed radar and light, making it nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. Inside, the small crew worked in near-total silence, their movements careful and precise. Chief Engineer Choi sat at his station, eyes fixed on the cloaking system readings. Every few seconds, he made tiny adjustments to keep them hidden from the Kraxan's scanning systems. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cool air. "Distance to target," Captain Kang asked quietly, as if the enemy might hear them through the vacuum of space. 3,000 kilometers in closing," Officer Nam replied from the navigation console. "The Kraxan relay station is exactly where intelligence said it would be." Through the main viewport, they could see their target, a relatively small Kraxan installation that looked like a metal spider web spreading out into space. Dozens of communication beams connected it to the larger Kraxan network. It seemed unimportant, which was exactly why they had chosen it. "Status of the modified devices?" Kang asked, turning to Officer Kang, who was checking the special cargo they had brought from Earth. "All systems green," Kang responded, his hands moving over the modified gaming consoles. "The chaos patterns are ready to upload. We just need to get close enough to establish a connection." The bridge crew watched their sensors carefully as they approached. A single Kraxan patrol ship passed nearby, but their cloaking held. The enemy vessel continued on its perfectly calculated course, never deviating, never suspecting. "Remember," Kang whispered, though everyone knew sound couldn't travel in space. We're not trying to destroy it. We're just introducing a little humanity into their network. Chief Engineer Choi adjusted their position slightly, like giving them a computer virus, except instead of a virus, we're giving them human nature. 2,000 kilometers, Nam announced. We're entering their outer sensor range. The tension on the bridge increased. If their calculations were wrong, if the Kraxan detected them now, they would have no chance against the Empire's weapons. Their ship was built for stealth, not combat. 1,000 kilometers, Nam continued. Their automated defenses should be activating now. Everyone held their breath, but the Kraxan systems remained quiet. Their cloaking technology, combined with the station's relative unimportance, was working in their favor. 500 kilometers, Nam said. We're within range. Captain Kang nodded to Officer Kang. Begin the upload. Officer Kang's fingers flew over his console. The modified gaming devices hummed to life, sending their chaos patterns through a tight beam transmission. On their screens, they could see the data stream connecting with the Kraxan relay. Upload initiated, Kang reported. First wave of chaos patterns entering their system. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Kraxan station continued its normal operations, its communication beams steady and unchanged. Seconds stretched into minutes. Are we sure it's working? Nam asked nervously. Chief Engineer Choi checked his readings. The data is definitely going in. They're accepting it as routine network traffic. Just then, something changed. One of the station's communication beams flickered slightly. Then another. It was subtle. So subtle that anyone else might have missed it. There, Captain Kang pointed. The chaos is starting to spread. Their systems are trying to process our patterns. They watched as more tiny irregularities appeared in the station's operation. A maintenance drone moved in an unexpected direction. A sensor array adjusted itself for no apparent reason. Second wave uploading now, Officer Kang reported, adding more complex gaming patterns. The changes became more noticeable. The station's perfect symmetry began to show small imperfections. Its rhythmic energy pulses developed a slight stutter. They're trying to analyze the data, Choi said, watching his instruments. Look at their processor usage. It's increasing exponentially as they attempt to find patterns in our chaos. Captain Kang allowed herself a small smile, like trying to teach a computer to understand why humans sometimes dance badly on purpose. The final wave of data uploaded successfully. The stealth ship began to slowly back away from the station, maintaining its cloak. Behind them, the Kraxan relay continued to show increasing signs of confusion. Mission accomplished, Officer Kang announced quietly. The chaos patterns are fully embedded in their network. There's no way for them to remove the data without shutting down the entire relay, which they won't do because their protocols don't allow for unexplained system resets. As they retreated to safe distance, the crew watched their handiwork through the sensors. The Kraxan station was now broadcasting their chaos patterns to every connected system in range, spreading human unpredictability through the enemy's perfect network like ripples in a pond. Take us home, Captain Kang ordered. Nice and slow. Let's not draw attention to ourselves. The Shadow Dancer turned gracefully and began its careful journey back to Earth space. Behind them, inside the Kraxan's vast network, human chaos had begun its work. The Empire's perfect order was about to experience something it had never encountered before, the beautiful irregularity of human thought. As they traveled home, Officer Nam spoke what everyone was thinking. Do you think it will really work? Will this small amount of chaos really bring down their entire empire? Captain Kang looked back at the now distant relay station. A single snowflake can start an avalanche, she said. We just introduced millions of snowflakes into their system. The stealth ship disappeared into the darkness of space, leaving no trace of its visit except for the subtle chaos now spreading through the Kraxan network, growing stronger with each passing moment. The command center buzzed with excitement 3 days after Operation Chaos began. Officers rushed between stations, sharing reports and pointing at displays as the first signs of success appeared. The giant screens showed something no one had ever seen before: Kraxan ships breaking their perfect formations. Commander Park stood at her usual spot, her eyes fixed on the tactical displays. She watched in amazement as a Kraxan battle group near Alpha Centauri began moving in irregular patterns. Their ships, normally arranged in mathematically perfect formations, started drifting out of position. "Look at this," she called out, pointing to the screen. "Battle Group 7 is responding to sensor contacts that don't exist. Their ships are chasing shadows." Dr. Kim hurried over, her tablet displaying streams of data from their monitoring stations. "It's working exactly as Lieutenant Yoon predicted," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Their systems are trying to make sense of our chaos patterns. They're seeing threats everywhere because they can't process the irregular data." On another screen, a Kraxan patrol fleet suddenly changed course, moving away from its assigned sector. 3 more fleets followed, responding to phantom signals generated by their compromised network. "Their entire command structure is based on perfect information flow," Dr. Kim explained to the gathering crowd of officers. "They've never encountered data they couldn't categorize. The chaos is spreading faster than they can contain it." Admiral Han entered the room, and everyone turned to look at him. "Report," he commanded. Commander Park stepped forward. "Sir, we're seeing widespread disruption across the Kraxan fleet. Their ships are receiving conflicting orders. Defense stations are targeting friendly vessels. Their perfect coordination is falling apart." The main display showed a new development. A Kraxan supply convoy had just reversed course in the middle of its route. The escort ships followed, then changed direction again, creating a confused tangle of movements. "Their logistics network is affected too," Officer Lee reported from his station. "Supply ships are being redirected randomly. Some are dumping cargo because they're detecting non-existent containment breaches." Dr. Kim pulled up more data on the main screen. "The chaos patterns are mutating as they spread through their network. Each Kraxan system tries to correct the irregular data, but ends up creating new variations. It's like a chain reaction of confusion." They watched as more reports came in. A Kraxan border station fired warning shots at its own patrol ships. A fleet commander ordered his ships to scatter because his systems detected an impossible number of human vessels. Everywhere they looked, the Empire's perfect order was dissolving into chaos. "What about their central command?" Admiral Han asked. "How are they responding?" "That's the beauty of it, sir," Dr. Kim replied. "Their command structure is so rigid that lower-level systems can't report problems they don't understand, and the higher-level systems are programmed to trust all incoming data. They're trapped by their own perfect protocols." Commander Park zoomed in on a sector where Kraxan ships were now moving in random patterns. They're trying to find solutions to problems that don't exist. Each attempt to restore order only adds to the chaos. A junior officer rushed up with a new report. "Sir, the Kraxan have just withdrawn from the new Jakarta system. Their entire invasion fleet pulled back without explanation." The room erupted in cheers, but Admiral Han raised his hand for silence. "Don't celebrate yet. Show me their new positions." The display updated, showing the Kraxan fleet's movements. Instead of their usual precise retreat patterns, ships were scattering in all directions. Some were moving deeper into their own territory, while others drifted in seemingly random paths. "Their command and control system is breaking down completely," Dr. Kim said, studying the data. "Each ship is receiving different corrupted data, leading to different responses. They can't coordinate their actions anymore." Commander Park watched as more Kraxan units began behaving erratically. "It's like watching the most organized mind in the universe have a nervous breakdown." "Sir," Officer Lee called out, "we're detecting power fluctuations in their major installations. The chaos patterns are affecting their energy distribution networks now." Admiral Han nodded slowly. "The cascade effect Lieutenant Yoon predicted. Their entire civilization runs on the same principles of perfect order. Once we introduced enough chaos, everything starts to fall apart." Dr. Kim finished. And they can't stop it without shutting down their entire network, which their protocols won't allow because they can't identify the exact cause of the problem. Through the command center's windows, the sun was setting over the Pacific. Its orange light mixed with the blue glow of the displays, creating an almost celebratory atmosphere. Humanity's craziest military plan was working. Commander Park turned to Admiral Han. "Sir, should we prepare our forces for a counterattack? The Kraxan are more vulnerable now than they've ever been." The Admiral studied the tactical displays for a long moment. The mighty Kraxan Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just days ago, was now tearing itself apart trying to impose order on chaos. Their perfect system had become their perfect prison. "No," he finally said. "We don't need to attack. We just need to wait. Let them experience the full beauty of human chaos. Let them learn why perfect order isn't always the answer." The officers returned to their stations, continuing to monitor the cascade of confusion spreading through the Kraxan Empire. What had started as a small infection of chaos in one relay station had grown into an epidemic of uncertainty, proving that sometimes the best way to defeat an impossibly powerful enemy was to make them question their own perfection. The Kraxan Empire's response came exactly as Lieutenant Yoon had predicted. Inside Earth's command center, the screens showed the unfolding disaster as the most powerful civilization in known space tried desperately to restore order to their systems. "They're activating their highest-level control protocols," Officer Lee reported, watching the data stream across his screen. "Every Kraxan installation is increasing its security parameters. They're trying to impose more order, more control." Lieutenant Yoon stood beside Admiral Han, both men watching as the Empire's attempt to save itself only made things worse. "It's like trying to stop a flood by adding more water," Yoon said quietly. The main display showed Kraxan ships receiving contradictory commands from multiple command centers. As each vessel tried to follow its programming and obey all orders, they ended up stuck in endless loops of conflicting actions. Some ships started spinning in place, their navigation systems unable to calculate a course that satisfied all their contradictory instructions. "Look at their defense grid," Commander Park called out. The tactical display shifted to show the Kraxan's automated defense network. Weapon platforms were activating randomly, targeting their own vessels as corrupted data convinced them that friendly ships were hostile. Dr. Kim rushed into the command center with new analysis. "Their attempts to restore order are actually accelerating the system collapse," she explained, putting her findings on the main screen. "Each new security protocol they add creates more opportunities for our chaos patterns to spread." Admiral Han watched as the mighty empire began tearing itself apart. "They're so focused on finding the pattern," he observed, "they can't accept that there isn't one." A massive explosion lit up one of the screens. A Kraxan defense station had just fired on its own supply convoy, its targeting computers convinced by chaos-corrupted data that it was facing an enemy fleet. "Sir," Officer Lee called out, "we're detecting massive energy surges throughout their territory. Their power distribution network is trying to compensate for phantom demands." The displays showed city after city in the Kraxan Empire going dark as their perfect power grid failed under the strain of trying to solve unsolvable problems. Their automated systems kept rerouting energy to handle non-existent threats, creating real emergencies in the process. "Their entire society is based on the assumption that everything has a logical pattern," Dr. Kim explained. "Their computers are literally burning themselves out trying to find order in our chaos." They watched as a Kraxan battle fleet, one that had threatened Earth just days ago, broke apart in confusion. Ships crashed into each other as their navigation systems failed. Others jumped randomly through hyperspace, their computers convinced they were executing emergency protocols. "This is more than just military defeat," Commander Park said softly. "Their whole civilization is coming undone." Lieutenant Yoon nodded, "because they built everything on perfect order, perfect logic. They never considered that someday they might face something that couldn't be predicted or controlled." The command center crew worked through the night, watching the cascade of failure spread through the Kraxan Empire. Their mighty warships drifted powerless in space. Their perfect cities went dark. Their flawless communication network dissolved into noise. Incoming transmission, Officer Lee announced suddenly. It's from the Kraxan Central Authority. First direct communication we've ever received from them. Admiral Han straightened. Put it through. The message was short, just a few lines of text. Query: how to restore order. Acceptable parameters for pattern recognition. Request immediate response. They still don't understand, Dr. Kim said, shaking her head. They think we have the solution, that there's some key to making sense of the chaos. Admiral Han looked at Lieutenant Yoon. How should we respond? Yoon thought for a moment, then typed a reply. The pattern is that there is no pattern. Accept the chaos. They sent the message, knowing the Kraxan computers would spend countless cycles trying to analyze those simple words, looking for hidden meaning where there was none. More reports flooded in through the night. The Kraxan Empire, which had threatened to conquer all of human space, was now helpless. Their perfect order had become perfect paralysis. Should we press our advantage? Commander Park asked. Launch a counterattack while they're vulnerable. Admiral Han shook his head. No need. They've already lost. Not to our weapons, but to something far more powerful, the realization that not everything in the universe follows their rules. As dawn broke over Earth's command center, the screen showed the final stages of the Empire's collapse. The mighty Kraxan, who had never lost a battle, had been defeated by humanity's greatest gift, their embrace of chaos, their ability to thrive in uncertainty. Lieutenant Yoon looked at the displays one last time before heading to get some rest. You know what's really interesting? He said to no one in particular. We beat them using video games. The chaos of millions of players just doing what felt right in the moment. No grand strategy, no perfect plan, just human nature. The command center staff continued their watch as the sun rose, monitoring the end of an empire that had believed too much in perfection and forgotten that sometimes the universe simply doesn't make sense. And that's exactly what makes it beautiful. The counterattack began at dawn, Earth time. Across the command center, screens lit up with tactical displays, showing the human fleet moving into position. Ships that had been hiding for weeks emerged from their concealed positions, forming up for what everyone hoped would be their final battle against the Kraxan Empire. Admiral Han stood at the command station, watching as the fleet approached the confused Kraxan armada. The enemy ships, once arranged in perfect geometric patterns, now drifted in disarray. Their synchronized movements were gone, replaced by random adjustments and contradictory maneuvers. All ships report ready, Commander Park announced. The Kraxan fleet is still struggling with their compromised systems. They can't coordinate their defenses. Begin the attack, Admiral Han ordered quietly. Full advance on all sectors. Human warships accelerated toward their targets. For the first time since the war began, they didn't face the usual wall of perfectly coordinated defensive fire. Instead, the Kraxan ships fired erratically, their targeting computers still trying to process the chaos infecting their networks. Lieutenant Yoon watched from his station as the battle unfolded. The plan that had seemed insane just days ago had worked better than anyone could have imagined. The mighty Kraxan, who had never known defeat, were helpless against their own confusion. Multiple hits on enemy vessels, Officer Lee reported. Their shields are failing. They can't maintain power distribution under our attack. The main display showed Kraxan ships attempting to reform their famous defensive formations, but each time they tried, their corrupted navigation systems pulled them out of alignment. Some ships fired on their own allies, their computers unable to distinguish friend from foe through the chaos. They're still trying to find patterns, Dr. Kim observed, monitoring the enemy's network activity. Even now, they can't accept that some things don't follow logical rules. The battle continued through the morning. Human ships, free to fight with all their natural unpredictability, struck from unexpected angles. They used tactics that would have been suicide against the organized Kraxan, but now worked perfectly against their confused defenses. By midday, it was over. The Kraxan Armada, pride of their empire, began a disorganized retreat from human space. Ships disappeared into hyperspace in random directions. Their coordinated withdrawal plans shattered like everything else in their once perfect system. In the aftermath, as the human fleet secured their victory, Captain Lee found Lieutenant Yoon in the observation dome, staring out at the stars. Debris from Kraxan ships drifted past the reinforced windows, a testament to their unprecedented victory. "You used their greatest strength against them," she said, joining him at the window. "Turned their order into a weakness." "No," Yoon replied softly. "I just helped them experience something they'd never understood before, the beautiful unpredictability of human nature. We didn't defeat them with strength or technology. We defeated them with chaos, with randomness, with all the things they could never understand." Throughout the day, reports came in from across human space. The Kraxan were withdrawing from every sector, their once mighty empire in retreat. Their perfect society, unable to handle the infection of human chaos, was collapsing under its own rigid protocols. Admiral Han gathered the command staff that evening for a final briefing. The room was filled with tired but happy faces, people who had seen humanity go from the brink of defeat to an impossible victory. "The Kraxan Empire," he began, "spent thousands of years perfecting their society. They made everything logical, predictable, controllable. And in doing so, they created their own greatest weakness. They forgot how to handle the unexpected." He paused, looking around the room. "But humanity, we thrive on the unexpected. We embrace chaos. We see patterns in randomness and randomness in patterns. That's what saved us. Not our weapons or our technology, but our natural human ability to dance with disorder." Later that night, Fleet Admiral Han recorded in his log, "Today marks a victory not of weapons or tactics, but of humanity's greatest gift. Our ability to embrace chaos and find opportunity in disorder. The Kraxan Empire learned too late that perfect order creates perfect vulnerability." In the days that followed, humanity began rebuilding their damaged colonies. The Kraxan threat was gone, not destroyed but fundamentally changed. Their perfect empire had been transformed by the introduction of human unpredictability, forced to confront the reality that not everything in the universe could be controlled or predicted. Lieutenant Yoon received numerous commendations for his innovative strategy, but he remained humble. When asked about his inspiration, he would simply smile and say, "I just noticed that even when humans lose at video games, they have fun doing it. Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy at all." The stars continued their eternal dance above Earth, their light reaching down to a civilization that had proven that imperfection could be stronger than perfection, that chaos could defeat order, and that being human, with all its wonderful irregularities, was the greatest advantage of all. The war was over, but its lesson would echo through the ages. In a universe of infinite possibilities, the ability to embrace uncertainty was the truest path to victory.